math and the history site both came up as conversations around this for very particular reasons. I think in both situations, what they're doing very, very well is thinking about like their user and knowing very well what the needs of their user are.
And I'll just add for ours, effectively that started out as the beginning of the syllabus. So if somebody's looking for what the class covers and all of that stuff, it's the same information that you will get when you get your syllabus. And then we just added relevant pictures because we had lists of pages that were just texts, and we have a field that survives in the fact that everything's beautiful. So adding in pictures and just making the rest of the experience a little bit richer, I think also helps get people to clue in on what this class actually covers.
Yeah, that's a big thing for us as we're kind of looking at different parts of our website is who's using it. Because sometimes the people who want to have an input in the design of it aren't always aware of who's using it, right? So like we have a lot of faculty who have an interest in how the research look, but it's not the faculty that uses the research pages, right? It's potential grad students looking to see what research is going on at Ohio State.
All right, so thanks to everyone for stopping by today. We are going to do something a little different this time. So today is not just going to be a regular presentation where I kind of walk you through what a feature of Drupal is or how to use that. Instead, we're actually going to have the presentation first, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time with a 3-person panel discussion, talking about a few topics that are relevant to the course modules, which is the feature in Drupal that we're going to kind of explore today. And we're going to have a pretty interesting dialogue about that and get some interesting ideas going out. So just as a little overview, we're going to have the introduction part. And this is where I kind of give you the overview of what the course module is in Drupal and kind of go through a walkthrough of a few of the features, like how to create courses, how to import them, and how to edit them. Afterwards, we're going to look at some examples of the course module in action. First, we're going to look at some pretty good, solid examples, and then we're going to look at a few more kind of exceptional or great examples, in addition to some basic pages that also work really, really well to showcase your courses on your site. And those examples are going to help kind of fuel the discussion we have later on. This is where I introduce a few of our guests in our panel, and then we kind of go through a few of these topics like the examples, pros and cons of the course module, and how well course modules kind of work compared to basic pages. So to kind of start this off, what's the course module? Course module is a Drupal feature that lets you create and share course offerings on your site. Pretty straightforward. You can see to the right here, we're looking at the landing page here. And this is one of 2 parts of the course module. So this landing page, or the course gallery, as I like to call it, this is kind of like your more public facing one. This is where folks are more likely to land and kind of use to look at what courses your department's offering. There's 2 parts, like I said. This is the course gallery or landing page. And the second one that will concern us here is the course project page. And you can see to the right, this is a pretty detailed one on the school design site. And this one has like a lot of information besides just like course hours and prerequisites. It's also like really well fleshed out. And we're going to look at this one again and a few others later on. So to start, you do need to have one requirement to create and manage courses on your site. You need to have the course manager role. Anyone that has administrator privileges can also create and manage courses for you. But for the most part, most of the people that edit courses on a site will have this course manager role. And to get that role, you just need to submit a ticket to the ASC Tech website. And then if you reach out to me, I can get you covered and get you that role. So how do you actually find the course module on your website? So after you log into your site, you go to the Drupal admin menu. It's always that top one, that top bar with all those little tabs, right? And then after you found that admin menu, you're going to want to go to the configuration tab. Then you want to find content authoring, and then the ASC course settings tab. And you look to the right here, there's a bit of a breadcrumb that kind of shows you where you go to actually get to this site. So this is kind of where once you've found the site or this page, you know you're in the right place. This is where you get to import courses to your website. So most of the time when you're adding a course to a website, you're most likely going to go through this import process. And there's a few steps to that. So when you're importing a course from site, it's usually kind of reaching from some kind of database to kind of pull up all these particular courses here. So it's always going to be this middle tab here when you want to import a course, this course search one. And when you get here, and if you see to the right, there's a few different fields here, like subject abbreviation, catalog number, and title. And you need to at least fill one of those fields out to get this function to work. So for the example here, I just searched 1101, just kind of like a very basic thing. And I had a bunch of different course offerings from different departments. So I was interested in importing the very first one we hear, Introduction to African American and African Studies. So once you've searched for that, we're going to kind of go through the actual process of getting that course imported into the site. So once we found what we want, which is going to be this 1100 course, we want to kind of mark the box on the far left here to the left of the course ID column. And what concerns us here are going to be the course ID columns, because this is what's going to be kind of like the main thing we choose to import into the actual site here. So once we found the course ID that we want, we're going to mark this box, and then we're going to scroll to the very bottom of the list. And then eventually we're going to hit the Save Selections button. And then once we do that, we should, assuming everything has worked right, we should be able to see the course ID that we want in this field that says course IDs. So we go back to course selection to get to this page. This is kind of be like the main home page for the course import. So once we make sure that this course ID is the one that we want, then we're going to check the import now box and save configuration. And to confirm that this is actually the right course that we want, you're going to open up the menu below that says Selected Course IDs list. And this is where we kind of look to confirm which courses are going to be imported into the site. And you can have multiple course IDs in here, so you don't have to just do one at a time. You can actually import quite a lot of courses into your site. You just want to make sure all those course IDs are separated by commas. So once you review everything and you're good to go on that front, this is when you're going to make sure Import Now is checked and you save your configuration. And that should import all the courses you want to your site. And there's also a little bit of a note to kind of keep in mind. So when you do run an import of a course on your website, you don't necessarily have to worry about any of the additional information that you may have added to a course when editing it. So you don't have to worry about an override occurring there. But you do have to kind of keep in mind that an import may overwrite some of the other fields below, like the credit hours, the course numbers, and your subject abbreviations. And it might also overwrite this description box here, but the way it's currently built, it's meant to kind of leave this additional information section alone here. So courses or course projects, they're like other content items, like basic pages or landing pages or research pages. Those are all in the content section. So if you want to create a course without having to go through the steps of importing it, then you would go to the content tab, and then you would create a new course here. And you'll eventually come across this page. Pretty straightforward. It says create course. It has the course name field, which is required, a description, additional field, and some other stuff below, like the credit hours, course numbers, subject abbreviation. And there's also a few filters at the bottom that's very specific to this site. So taxonomy is a pretty important thing to keep in mind when you're working with courses. Those let you create filters for at least 3 different parts of a course project. So if you want to say, for example, filter out courses by semester, Then you would add something like autumn, spring, summer, kind of like below. You can also do it by year. You could do it by field. If it's like, say, the math site and you want courses only for algebra or geometry, you can create taxonomy terms that filter your courses out there as well. But once you get everything settled, you got all the information that you want in this course, you're going to click Save to Finish. So let's say you want to actually edit the course, though, or any of the courses that imported, because most of the time it's pulling from kind of like a template almost. And a lot of the time that you'll see, a lot of these courses are usually kind of like very basic, bare bones information. So for example, this ACAD one, there's not a lot to see going on here. There's not a lot going on here, is what I'm saying. So if you want to edit that to be much more fleshed out or to give it a bit more up-to-date information, there's a couple of different ways to do that. So the easiest way is to go to the Content tab. And then when you're in that content that content directory, you can search for the course there, or you could also go to the courses landing page or the courses gallery page. And then when you are looking at here, and you can click any of these red links here that take you straight to the actual course page itself. So these screenshots that I have to the right, I went with the second option. It's usually just a little bit easier for me since a lot of websites don't have very large course galleries. So typically they have pretty small lists here. So that way I can just click on the link. I go straight to the course page and then I can edit and I can change any of that information that I want. And then once you're done editing any of that information, you're going to save it. And that's basically the walkthrough. Courses, once you get the hang of them, are pretty easy to use. And they're also pretty simple to manage too. So it's just more of a practice rather than a very complicated process. Now we're going to look at some examples of the course module in action on some of the ASE websites. So you can kind of see here, I'm going to be pulling from math. I'm going to be pulling from Near Eastern Studies, history, design, and a couple sites from astronomy. So let's start with the course gallery on the math site. So we're looking at the landing page for the Department of Mathematics. So you can kind of see here, pretty straightforward, what's being offered in the autumn, spring, and a couple of summer courses here. So I had these, thankfully, pulled up well ahead of time. So let me go through a few of these here. So let's say we want to look at pre-college mathematics, right? So this is the course project for Math 1050, pre-college math 1. And you can see here, we do have a pretty good solid description up here. We have information about credit hours. And we also, one of the features that course projects have, like other content items, is that you can attach documents to them. So this is a PDF of everything that the course already has. In addition to some documents like syllabi, appendixes, room assignments, study guides, and some textbook information. So this is a pretty solid, pretty good course project. So if we look at another one here, pre-college math 2, follows the same kind of formula here, right? With the description, credit hours, PDF document with a course description, same kind of documents, syllabi, calendars, midterms, and textbook information. And we're going to also look at the Department of Near Eastern and South Asian Languages, a culture site. So we can see here, this one's got a little bit more going on with its filter and landing page. So like I said before, this all relies on your website's taxonomy terms. So this is why we have, for example, something very different than what we have on the math site, which is just kind of like search by keywords. Whereas this one kind of lets us sort by major and minor. So we have our Arabic majors, Arabic minors, Hebrew and Jewish studies majors and minors, Islamic studies, and so on and so forth, which kind of helps us narrow down. I'm just going to give this a test run, see how well this works. And see, we still have quite a bit going on, but this is kind of a much more narrowed down listing. It's very specific to the Arabic minor. let's say general education courses. It looks like there's also another filter here that kind of helps narrow the search down even more. So let's say we want the culture design ideas. Let's just see what pops up there. So we takes us down to at least one course. So we get contemporary Arab cultures here. So they're doing pretty well with their course gallery filter options here. So how are they doing, I wonder, with some, oh, this is the Department of History. So this is the Department of History's course gallery and landing page here. So we can see here that there's broken down by fields of study. We've got constellations and we got themes here. So you can see history's got a lot going on. We got East Asian history, we've got Latin American history, military history, so on and so forth. Constellations, that's a pretty interesting term. So, I guess it's one of the filters in addition to everything else that they have here, like social justice, human conflict, peace and diplomacy, global, early modern. Let's see how well that filters out. Looks like we still have quite a bit going on there, which is still pretty good. So if I say, let's say African history, let's see if that gives us anything else, which surprisingly actually gives us quite a few offerings here. So they have a very well-built gallery here.
Can I just interrupt a second? That's our website. And it used to be that these courses were pulled in from somewhere, the registrar or from SIS or something. Mm-hmm. And I guess I wasn't aware, this is the website I handle, but I wasn't aware that it changed. And that so now we just control it ourselves.
So it's likely still pulling from that source. But the good thing about what the course module lets you do is that you can tailor not only the course gallery, but the course projects to kind of however you want it to be. So for example, this is kind of like the default information that it's pulling from. And if you want to actually have this much more fleshed out, kind of like what we saw with like pre-college math, for example, that's something you have control over.
Okay, that's good. We have different people that teach the courses. So that was another question I had. Like, do these departments change it each semester based on what people are teaching? Because ours can kind of vary a bit.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm not exactly sure about the source that it's pulling from that updates per semester, but I think what you can do, at least on your end, even though there's probably a lot going on specifically with history, it is something that you can update if you want to. So okay, there is that going for it. But the actual database of courses that it's pulling from, I'm a little unsure about how much you can control on that. That's something I can get back to you on with a more.
I just wondered because some of those were pretty elaborate descriptions on the other websites and they were great. Mm-hmm. But we have ours separately on the website for each semester just because different people teach the courses differently. So thank you though.
Yeah. So that's something that you could, like I said, that's something you do have some control over. So if someone is teaching, let's say, history of modern Africa for the autumn semester, and then you have someone else teaching it in spring, that's something you can control.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hopefully that helped. So now we're on the Department of Design site. We're looking at their course gallery here. So you can see here, it's kind of straightforward. You got academic programs and we got the offering terms. And I kind of really appreciate how kind of straightforward this is just from a user experience angle. Like I love how much detail like the Department of History site has for their course gallery. But sometimes when I look at it, I get a little, not necessarily overwhelmed, but sometimes it can be a little difficult to kind of determine what I'm actually looking for here. So sometimes it's just a matter of deciding if you want to basically have your visitors have the option of finding whatever specific subject they were looking for in a pretty vast offering, or if you kind of want to break it down as simple as possible, which I think design does pretty well. So undergraduate, design foundations, industrial design, interior design, those are some of the programs that they offer. Offering terms, autumn, spring, and semester. Pretty straightforward stuff. So this is something that we already seen a little bit of before. This is for Design 4650, collaborative design. And you can see here, it's got the same information. This is in the description field, the interdisciplinary knowledge and problems examined, so on and so forth. You got your credit hours, and you have a prerequisite section here. And we're going to kind of go through this one because there's a lot to explore. So let's see here. We kind of have a pretty simple introduction, which is good. Achieving what's called the vertical studio experience. Third year undergrad students enrolling in Design 4650, fourth year undergrad students enrolling in 5650, and graduate students also enrolling in 5650 Advanced Collaborative Design. So another thing that I think they're doing really, really great here is the collaborative studio section. The course projects actually are pretty flexible content items in Drupal. So you have a lot of options and leeway to kind of use media just like this. This is kind of providing a visual cue for how these courses work here. Students know your enrollment window, some helpful information there. And we also have some call-out boxes here. Really good use of these. Really love how these are going. And it's also got the filter items. So undergraduate, industrial design, interior design, visual comm, and the semester offering here in spring. So this is a pretty exceptional use. And I'm not just saying that to be flattering. I think this is a very exceptional use of the course project there. So the next couple of examples that we're going to walk through here, these are going to actually be not course modules, but these are actually going to be exceptional uses of basic pages. And these are going to kind of help spark some of the conversation later with our guests about how well these work and when should we use these. So we're looking at the astronomy site, Department of Astronomy. We're looking at Astronomy 1101, From Planets to the Cosmos. This is a basic page, and it's part of a menu of other GE and non-major courses. So pretty introductory course. And there's a lot going on here that I think artistically does very well, but it's also really functional. So it's not just aesthetically kind of pleasing to go through and look at this stuff and kind of like dig deeper. It's also making it a pretty good user experience to kind of go through and examine course information here. So I really, really enjoy this specific one here. Good use of the image too, by the way. Let's see what the other one looks like here. So this is more of a general astronomy and astrophysics course list here. So looks like we have like a slideshow here even. So all really good looking astronomy related stuff. Basically provides a breakdown of what astronomy is, study of planets, stars, and galaxies, and the universe as a whole. The astronomy department offers a wide range of courses, those designed for non-majors, and some obviously designed for specific majors. So this is very, very inviting. This is kind of wanting me to kind of learn a little bit more. I only took like one astronomy course when I was an undergrad, but I really did enjoy it. So if I had kind of stumbled upon this page, I think if I just to get some more gen ed stuff under my belt, I would have liked to probably like go through some of this. So yeah, those are all the examples that I have to go through. So we basically went through the whole list of our good examples, some of the more exceptional examples, and some examples of the basic pages being used to display course information. So this is where we get into the second half of our presentation. This is where we begin the discussion panel, which is something I've been looking forward to. So we're going to go through some introductions here, and we're going to kind of explore three of these topics, about examples, pros and cons, and the course module versus the basic page. And I kind of like generated some questions for each one just to kind of help spur the conversation a bit and to help keep things guided and structured. So to introduce our guests, Would our guests like to introduce themselves?
Sure, I can start. Wayne Schlingman, Department of Astronomy.
I guess I'll go next. So my name is Gabe Tippery. I'm from the Department of Design, and pass it to Tracy, I guess.
I'm Tracy Braun, and I'm from, Department of Math.
All right, thanks for that. So just for the record, I plan to do future panel discussions here. So this is a pretty open invitation kind of thing. So you don't need to be of a certain level of expertise to participate in these discussions if you want. I hold these second Tuesday of every month. So if it's something that you would ever be interested in, feel free to reach out, or I may reach out to you if I think you might be interested in the topic. So with that said, how about we go into the very first topic about the examples? So here's a few of the questions that I asked. And like I said, you don't necessarily have to stick strictly to these. Feel free to talk about whatever you want. What are your thoughts about the examples that we went through?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Tracy, did you want to go first?
Again.
Okay, I'll jump in and just say that, I think that as we were preparing for this, math and the history site both came up as conversations around this for very particular reasons. I think that in both situations, what they're doing very, very well is thinking about like their user and knowing very well what the needs of their user are, right? I, as an academic advisor in another part of my life, use the math site all the time, right? To tell my students like, hey, look, you're not sure if you should go into math 1148 versus 1150. Like there's example midterms here. You can look like all of those look like Latin to me, but maybe they make sense to you to help you determine what level you're supposed to be at, right? And from that perspective, I think it works really, really well. They've done a really nice job of preparing the right amount of resources to help students make decisions about where they can be successful in those courses, right? I feel the same way about the history site in the sense that though as an outside observer and someone who's never particularly prided themselves on being very good at history, it might seem a little overwhelming, but it's very obviously intentional to helping them understand. They're only trying to cover all of history, right? It's about the broadest topic you can get to in some ways or another. So they've obviously come to some ways that they help people understand that and help people narrow that down, whether those are majors or whether those are specializations or, topics of study in their field. I don't know enough about the history field to know, but I suspect that that's what's going on there, right? And that their students understand the topic of constellations in their discipline, that we're specializing around some sort of something or another, right? And I think those are great uses for it.
That's what I was noticing, Zach, as you were going through the different examples. I was realizing that so you picked really interesting areas because they have different clientele, I guess, right? So like math, we have a lot of required classes, but I don't know if you really consider them GE, right? You there's certain requirements you have to take, but it's not like you really get a choice much. You're pretty much told, you tested here, you got to take this. So ours is a little different, but like history, that's like a general ed area. And I don't know if that was new GE or old GE on there, but people have to take in different categories to fill certain general ed. I think is it themes now? I don't really know what all the categories are, but so that's a different kind of reason to go there. But again, since that's a big area of general ed, you're going to get a lot of users, just like math. Pretty much everybody has to take a math class. And then design seems to be more specific. Like the average person probably is never going to take it as a design class, I'm guessing, Gabe. Right. So
we don't make it very easy.
Yeah. and of course your design, and so of course your pages look fabulous. So isn't it kind of interesting? And then astronomy kind of falls maybe in the middle, kind of part GE, but also a lot of majory folks, it seems like, would be using that. So it's kind of interesting that depending on what kind of clientele might depend on like what you would use as filters or what kind of qualities you would put in there. And that was really interesting feedback to hear too about that the sample midterms and stuff are useful. So I don't really use those pages. I invited some of my other math colleagues here who do use those pages more, Harrison and Ann, who I don't know if they want to speak to that, but I thought it'd be good for them to see other ideas on how people use them and how people use other sites that maybe we might be able to incorporate in math.
And I'll just add for ours, effectively, that started out as the beginning of the syllabus. So if somebody's looking for what the class covers and all of that stuff, it's the same information that you will get when you get your syllabus. And then we just added relevant pictures because we had lists of pages that were just texts, and we have a field that survives in the fact that everything's beautiful. So adding in pictures and just making the rest of the experience a little bit richer, I think also helps get people to clue in on what this class actually covers.
I also think too, Wayne, your classes are more, what I want to say, in a way you can market your classes. Like math, we don't really market our classes because, right, you either have to take it or you don't. Most people aren't going, let's see, I have a room for an elective. I know math. It's not usually a thing, right?
Those students are already in my major.
Yeah, those are all some pretty interesting points. Also, by the way, while I was going through those examples, giving my thoughts and feedback on the fly, just so everyone's aware, I'm not trying to like name or shame anyone for how their stuff looks. Those are just kind of very off the cuff comments on my end. So hopefully I haven't provided some scathing feedback on anything while I was going through. But yeah, those are all some really interesting points. Looks like we have someone in the chat with a question. It's Wayne. So another example of the list of courses and theme structures as well. Oh, that's a good point. So it's the courses for the non-majors. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just the list where each of the courses has their own course picture and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Nice. So I think we can kind of go through that after the discussion, just so we capture a little bit of it. So that all said, how about we move on to topic 2? Do you all feel pretty satisfied with the example conversation, or do you have any more thoughts to add?
I was going to ask a question on the page you showed. I think it was maybe a design page with the info sheets, like that had the different boxes of the different people with and you could click and get their info sheets. It looked like maybe that was a class that's taught by different people, and so each person has their own info sheet. Is that right, Gabe?
Yeah. So, and I was going to sort of maybe mention that as we get into the pros and cons section here. So maybe that's a good transition. Yeah, that's a course that we generally run 5 to 6 sections a year, just in the spring. And each instructor has a completely different topic. The unifying factor of them is that they are all topics that go beyond our basic disciplines. So they're not just an interior design topic or just a visual communication design topic or something like that. And so it's intentionally sort of a hallmark of our program that we're one of the few programs in the nation that has all 3 of these majors under one roof, And so, and the real world of design is incredibly collaborative across these. So each instructor prepares basically like an info sheet. And that's also why that page talks a little bit about knowing your enrollment window to the students, because it's one of the very few courses that our students have to compete for, right? They actually have to enroll their courses when their scheduling window opens. Otherwise, they could get closed out of their first choice. So, which is not an unheard of thing for most of the university. Most of the university is probably used to getting closed out of courses, but our students are not really used to that scenario. They enroll whenever they want to because it's a competitive major and there's not competition for the seats. So yeah, basically those are PDFs, just the same as the math site is using for their sample midterms and things like that. They're just sort of presented in this way, and it's one spot that I have to update every year with like the new offerings. So
yeah, I like the way though, like if you have, like, I don't know if we have any math courses like that where, we have several different instructors and they teach it maybe a little bit differently. That might be a nice way to be able to have different options for the different instructors.
Yeah, it's a really nice way for like history. I think they were mentioning that they have, different options every semester, right? Now that would be my next question to them, right? Is it that, history 1101 is taught differently by Professor X versus Professor Z, or is it that more that they're like turning on 1101 versus 1102, right? Semester to semester. But if you do have courses where the instructor really matters a lot, right? Special topics courses or education abroad or, things like that. That can be a great way to do it, is those little call out boxes. And then that's the only thing I have to update every year is, the section numbers stay the same. I just relink an instructor, relink a PDF. I can upload all of those really quickly. And then the students know where to look for them. So, and then the students can have a little efficacy in this. So.
Nice. Yeah, that was a really good last question there for that topic. So if you were all okay, do you want to move on to topic 2? Kind of some of the advantages and limitations that the course module may have?
Yeah.
Yeah, this one's kind of like the most direct one here. So what are your thoughts? What do you think are some of the strengths of this module, and where do those strengths kind of stop short?
I think in our use of it, I think that the real strength in the courses module tends to be in how you end up setting up your taxonomy. If you're not utilizing taxonomy, then it's essentially just like you could do it with static pages just as easily, right? And it starts to become things like very minor things, right? Static pages let you have a gallery at the top, whereas like there's no gallery function for a courses page, right? Very little intuitive things like that. The real power, I think, comes from how you choose to use the taxonomy. One of the reasons design came to the fact of like having taxonomies on there, both for undergraduate studies and graduate studies, as well as each of our major programs, is because there's not a ton of overlap between those. And so by taking the time to go ahead and categorize all of them, then it gives me static URLs that we can use in advising and we can use in other places in the site, right? Design's top bar is not cluttered with a course's overview, but undergraduate studies is a direct link to just the undergraduate ones, and undergraduate studies is just a direct link to the graduate studies, right? So kind of trying to really quickly narrow that stuff down. Or every semester as an advisor, when I say, hey, interior designers, get ready, here's a link to all your courses, right? It's also something that we have a little bit more control over exactly when it gets updated. In that sense. So every single one of our course numbers changed this term. And I was able to make sure that was something I could push out to the students, right? And I could do it in a way that just sent them a link to the interior design courses, and they didn't have to worry about the industrial or the VC ones, right? So I think that taxonomy is really the key difference between, the two. I think astronomy is a great example of how you do that with static pages. If I'm assuming they don't have a ton of overlap between their, what's for a major and what's for a non-major. It's like, okay, you built that, it's never changing, right? Like they're not starting to let commoners like me into astronomy 4000 something, right?
Be surprised. But yeah, no, it's very straightforward in the sense that like these are GE and themes offerings, these are our majors offerings, and these are our graduate student offerings. And since you need permission or additional courses to go between them all, it is usually, yeah, exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, Tracy, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing that was coming to my mind was if you add a lot of taxonomies, you have tons of things you can search on and stuff, then you end up with what we have on our people page, which is we have a gray box like this big, and you have to scroll down just to get to the first item, right? Mm-hmm. So that would be one thing I would just throw out as a consideration as you add taxonomy.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things about taxonomy, especially when it comes to course modules, is that there's really no limit to how much you can have, but there's kind of a limit to how much you should have, right? Otherwise, you tend to kind of just, as you just described, have that effect. So yeah, that's actually pretty good to point out there. So it sounds like the course module's real strength kind of lies in how it behaves with taxonomy. And I guess effective use of the taxonomy is kind of what determines how strong the course module will kind of perform on your site.
I think the other real pro to the courses module is because it does give you a very easy way to jump into having course pages at all, right? Because it has the ability, if you don't currently have any resource like this and you feel like your site users need a resource like this, right? The courses module is the easiest point of entry for that, in the sense that you can go in there and you can say, bring in all the design courses, and it's going to just build you 100 or 50 pages, essentially static pages that are logically named, that are pulling in at least your course catalog and things like that. In an hour, you now have a page for all of those things, right? What you do after that is the big question, right? Do you start to flush out just the ones that are that you're trying to in your GE curriculum and add, the ones that you're trying to actually promote, and you don't have to do that for the ones that, capstone for the major that they're all going to have to take or they don't graduate, or, I think that, and this came up in some of our previous discussion, sort of, my big question around the pro and con, and also maybe starting to transition into topic 3 of course module versus basic pages is, I know that Wayne and astronomy, like they had sort of started a lot of their infrastructure before the course module was really an option, right? And so the question really to me in how we start to talk about pros and cons in basic pages versus course module is like, if your site went down today and you had to start over, would you have still done it in the basic pages? Like in your use of basic pages, are there things that like you're missing, right? Or would you go, now courses is the way to go now? Like if I had to rebuild it all,
So one of the things is because we are going to have to think about rebuilding it in many ways, because almost all of our courses, at least all the GE courses, are going to be moved to themes, and you're going to have legacy GE and theme GE, and how those match back and forth, even though you're linking to effectively the same course or the equivalent course, depending on what people are registering for. And so that actually makes it significantly simpler than having, here's the legacy GE pages, here's the new theme GE pages, and then here's all the other stuff. So we are going to have to go through that process.
And do you think that you are going to just try and update all your static pages, or are you thinking of transitioning to the courses module?
Given the fact that
I'm not going to hold you to it.
No,
you know?
but I have not used the courses module, but maximizing what it can do or figuring out how we can make it simplest for students. And I think that being able to use the taxonomy actually makes it much easier to get through stuff.
Yeah, I personally feel like unless you were a program that really only was trying to market a very few number of your courses per se, right? I can't imagine personally a time when static pages are going to be the better solution, right?
Yeah. And if you're going to market a page, you can have specific pages for those specifically to market those pages.
Right.
And they can either link back and forth between the static and dynamic modules.
Yeah, I actually like the courses module to the point where I wish it had one more level in it. And what I mean by that is I've spent some time on History's website, and I'm just going to keep picking on History just a little bit here. It's not picking on it, but
be careful. I'm lurking. Go ahead.
Yeah. They seem to be in a place where they're kind of in between they're trying to do a lot of really interesting things. And the question, they seem to need an interstitial, something between the total modules and then almost the ability to pick a constellation and then have the description of what this constellation thing is. They're doing that right now on the static pages. They're trying to kind of do that and then linking to that. And in that way, the courses module is working really well for them because they get static URLs that they can then link to. But it's trying to figure out how do you tell them about, I have to go back so that I don't just, global early modern constellation. What does that mean? You have that somewhere else on your page and then you're pulling things in here. So from a navigation perspective, it's a little bit hard to figure out. And that's probably the one place where I feel like the courses module isn't serving as well as it could when we get to this level of depth of trying to understand what's going on outside from an outside perspective. Maybe that's not an issue though for the primary users of the history site. I don't know them.
I'm not really sure, to be honest. The constellations are driven by faculty and they're really more for graduate students. But yeah, you make a great point. It would be nice. We have constellations listed under our course info, but it would be great to have a space on that courses page that we could explain that. You're right about that.
Could you hack the research module into a constellations type module where you can use it for getting through all of your different themes and then that copies you out to the courses? I'll make it hard for Zach. And
yeah, those are all very good questions. Tracy, is there anything you want to add too?
No, nothing yet, but it's interesting ideas being thrown around. Yeah, I don't have any thoughts on it. And I don't tend to use the history pages, so I don't know, because I'm not an advisor. I'm just a grad program coordinator. So I really only work with students who are taking math classes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think there's another element here that kind of keeps being brought up. And that's definitely audience, right? So Tracy, since I've worked with you quite a bit, a lot of the stuff that comes up usually has to do with appealing to graduate students, right? Mm-hmm. So it sounds like kind of knowing your audience is also kind of another factor to kind of keep in mind when you're working with your course module or your basic pages to display this info.
Yeah, that's been a big thing for us as we're kind of looking at different parts of our website is who's using it. Because sometimes the people who want to have an input in the design of it aren't always aware of who's using it, right? So like we have a lot of faculty who have an interest in how the research looks, but it's not the faculty that uses the research pages, right? So it's potential grad students looking to see what research is going on at Ohio State. So, so sometimes that can be a challenge to navigate what the people who want to put the information on want versus what is the audience looking for.
Yeah, and I also think that kind of goes back to history since we've kind of pulled Laura into this conversation now. And it also kind of ties into kind of what I think Gabe has mentioned a couple times earlier before too, about when you're looking at their course gallery and you see these options, constellations, themes, so on and so forth. The audience there, yeah, I think knowing the audience there kind of determines whether that's kind of the route you should go, that the audience that you're hoping to get or target anyway with this or appeal to is able to know what all this stuff means. Go ahead.
So I had a question. So, and I missed sadly I missed the data analytics, the site analytics part that you did, but I'm curious if getting that information would give us more feedback on who our audience is on different pages.
I believe it should. For the most part, the demographics information that's available in a analytics report, it can tell you how much traffic is going to certain pages, but it doesn't necessarily break it down. For example, between certain traits of a demographic, right? So overall, for example, you can kind of tell age range, gender, location, device, so on and so forth. That's generally kind of like applying to who's coming to the website. And that kind of focuses on the website as a whole. The limits of the analytics report is that it can't really, or at least just doesn't anyway, provide you that same kind of breakdown of information of who is using what. It just kind of tells you basically traffic, how long they're on certain pages, bounce rate, those kind of things.
But would it tell you like internal or external, for example?
Because you could do internal OSU IP sorted by age, and that's going to tell you whether or not it's undergrads, graduate students versus faculty.
That's a good question. I think that's something we can set up, assuming we don't already. That's something I can kind of discuss with Ava. But yeah, that's a very good question. So analytics can also kind of like hopefully shed some light on that.
And I'm wondering, can you link it to major so you can find out, are these students visiting your website? Are they people in your major or are they people outside your major? Like, so is it math people visiting our department or is it, Gabe and other people from other advisors from other departments that are trying to see what's going on in math, for example?
Yeah.
I know you can count on me for 5 to 10 a week. So.
Yeah, we tend to, depending on your site's traffic, sometimes one individual can have a disproportionate effect. But that's a good question, Tracy. And I don't really have an answer for sure for you at the moment, but I think that's something I can follow up with you on. And we can kind of go on from there. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, because that would be really helpful.
Yeah. So I believe we can set up a report like that. I just don't know if that's something we do right now. That's just the thing. We are kind of looking at how we can kind of tweak our reports. So hopefully that's something that we can offer you. But yeah, so we're kind of running up on the final minute. So thanks everyone for contributing to this. I think this has been like a really great conversation, and I'd like to definitely kind of have more of these. So not just kind of spark interesting conversation and share good ideas, but also to kind of have other people feel welcome to kind of add their 2 cents to a conversation. So even though, for example, Laura wasn't like officially part of this panel, I wanted her to kind of feel welcome to add her feedback and her thoughts. So that applies to basically everyone too. So yeah, I'm definitely going to host more of these in the future as well. So wanted to thank Tracy, Wayne, and Gabe for their time today. Really appreciate their thoughts, ideas, and the good conversation.